Good afternoon. So we're carrying on with the poetry answers. Like I said, I'm doing the answers and the essay questions to the poems that I've already covered. So this one is on the same page as the Amakaduka at Glencoe Station. So now I'm carrying on with Midterm Break. So Midterm Break, I don't believe, had an essay topic, but there are 10 questions. So what is unusual about the title of the poem? So Midterm Break suggests a holiday. There is a connotation of fun and seeing family again. However, the content of the poem is the opposite. It deals with tragedy and grief. Number 2, why do they use the word nulling when writing about the school bells? So it is onomatopoeia, usually has a somber connotation. It's not a light ring. Okay, and you can see it as foreshadowing, letting the reader know what is ahead. Number 3, what does the poet find strange about his father's behavior? So it says there, taken funerals in his stride. So usually his father is emotionally composed, but something about this one has him crying openly. This is unsettling to the poet. So remember again with Midterm Break, the poet is an adult now, but he's writing the poem in hindsight, like he's processed the emotions. So he writes the poem to show that is what was going through his mind at the moment. So think about it in terms of a flashback. Okay. Number 4, the pun, hard blow. Now, usually people assume that puns can be light-hearted and funny, and usually yes. But remember, the point of a pun is its double meaning, okay, the play on words. Now, play doesn't always mean fun or light-hearted. So, hard blow, it means harsh news. So, it's something terrible that you heard about. But physically, it was a hard blow that killed the child. 5, list the siblings in order. So the poet, because he was at school, the deceased, it mentions he's 4 years old, and then the baby. How does the use of the enjambment add to the ideas of lack of control? So remember, it's run on lines. So you read through it a little bit quicker, and you don't necessarily stop at the end of each line or at the end of each stanza. So it shows flow, okay? Something is continuous. If we put that together with the content of the poem, somebody finding out bad news often isn't in control of the situation. It almost seems like the world is going ahead without you. So that is what is happening there. He's got anxiety, he's got discomfort, okay? He's anxious. 7, comment on the line, wearing a poppy bruise on his left temple. So again, it speaks about commenting. You have to give your thoughts on the subject matter. So first of all, it's a metaphor. Comparing the bruise to an item of clothing that can be worn doesn't seem out of place. It's almost like it can be removed. So this is part of the poet's denial. Poppies are usually associated with sleep and death. They are also red, pointing to the death of the child and the redness of the bruise. 8, comment on the simile. It's comparing the way the child is lying in the box to how he sleeps in his bed. There's no change. It's still quiet, at peace. There is still some denial on the poet's part. Another thing that you'll notice in both the previous video going through the answers as well as this video is you always speak in present tense. And again, I'll bring that up in a video on how to write a literature and a poetry essay. So you have to speak in the present tense, and generally it's third person, and you don't talk about yourself. You talk about the poet, reader, boy, etc. Okay, then we've got 9, the significance of the last line, standing alone. Usually it's important, it wants to highlight something, and that's because it reveals the age of the child, and that is what makes this so terribly sad. Okay, the boy was 4 years old. So it emphasizes the terrible loss, and now perhaps the poet is finally acknowledging what happened. Okay, then it says comment on the poet's use of euphemism and restraint, and you will see that this is quite a long paragraph answer, but the point is you have to explain both of those. And again, stating the obvious, you also have to explain what is actually going on, or provide definitions. So everything is indirect, it's all implied, and the poet distances himself. But the whole point of that is to highlight his denial, the fact that he wasn't really told what was going on. We as the reader find out with the poet, and it builds suspense. It builds tension. So you do have a bit of comic relief with the baby in the pram giggling and laughing and cooing. And then it goes back to the seriousness of the matter, the somber tone, the solemn tone. So there are signs that something is wrong. That's what also creates the tension, and then eventually, right at the end of the poem, we now too realize what is going on. All right, last two poems. We Wear the Mask and Sonnet 130. So, We Wear the Mask, 5 questions. So this is about the people who are hiding things from the world, taking charge of their facade, taking pride in the fact that they are able to deceive the world. So name 2 things the mask hides: the cheeks, the eyes. So blush of embarrassment shows anger, emotion. The eyes can be watery, glassy, bright. It also shows mood. So those are the 2 things that the mask hides. 2 words in line 10 that contradict each other: smile and cries. Image of torn and bleeding hearts impact our understanding of what the mask is concealing. So torn and bleeding is not just a feeling of ouch or a little bruise. This is something that has affected them deeply. So they're not just smiling because they were a little bit disappointed. This is hiding people or people's emotions that are very, very, very traumatized. So it speaks about the anguish, the betrayal, reoccurring hurt. And if you consider the context of the poem, that it's after the American Civil War and the way that the slaves had to then find their way through life, it does make sense. What is the speaker's motivation for wearing the mask? So in the words of the poem, they don't want the world to realize how its actions affect them. What the poet doesn't want to be transparent. They don't need to see. So if you think of, sticks and stones break my bones, but words will never harm me, you kind of get that idea. Some people purposefully go out of their way to hurt and injure and humiliate people, and you don't really want to give them the satisfaction of knowing that they got to you. So do you empathize with the speaker of the poem? What action would you take if you found yourself living under similar conditions? Now, this is a type of own opinion question that students really struggle with, because sometimes you don't feel anything. If you think of cartoons, sometimes you don't find it funny. If you think of advertisements, you don't think it's a good advertisement. So what you have to do is put yourself in that person's shoes. So try and think of a similar situation that you might face. So it would be difficult to work, live, and play while hiding your true self. Okay, you've got the emotions. You don't want to be honest with your reactions because somebody could take advantage, and that definitely isolates you. Okay, that is not pleasant. That is not a healthy way of living. So maybe you don't want to let the bully know that they got to you. Maybe your friend made a joke that actually hurt you, but you don't want people to say that you're a sourpuss or something like that, so you don't say anything. Okay, eventually that eats away at you. Okay, essay question. So the content of the poem is dark, but the tone is light and cheerful. So what they wanted you to do is show the contradiction between the tone and the theme. So you need to look at the imagery and the form, okay, and why does it make it effective? So again, we wear the mask. There's a contradiction. The effect of this is to show the difference between what the world sees and what is hidden. Again, you'll notice all of the poem introductions for the essays have a rephrasing of the topic, okay, and that is how you show the reader what you're going to be discussing. It also helps you to make sure that you're on track and that you don't lose your way and include irrelevant information. So the tone is light and cheerful. There is a rough rhyme scheme, but more importantly, there is a rhythm. It has a lyrical quality. It is sing-song, and this also makes it light, okay? The mask also smiles and grins, taking pleasure in the deception. It seems like the person is really happy that they're able to be this deceitful. Okay, they're taking ownership of it. There's a sense of pride. On the other hand, it talks about, tears, sighs, bleeding hearts, tortured souls. It's talking about, the events after the American Civil War. So the content is dark, but the tone is light and cheery. And basically that's how some people are. They're going through a lot. They don't necessarily want people to know about it. And so they wear a mask. I must say most of the students that I've taught this poem to have appreciated this poem. I think it definitely has a lot more relevance than perhaps some of the other poems. Okay, Sonnet 130. So Shakespearean sonnet. This is where he talks about what his mistress is not, and then his final conclusion is that it doesn't actually matter because I love her truthfully for who she truly is. It makes my love a lot better than those people who are using false comparisons, because that would then backfire on them and make their love false, because they're loving an idea. They're not loving the person for who they actually are. And Shakespeare does this a lot. 3 feet, 14 lines, rhyming couplet. You've got your 3 quatrains and your rhyme scheme that never changes. Identify the figure of speech. It's a negative simile. So instead of saying her eyes are like the sun, he says it isn't. Name 2 things the speaker compares his mistress to: coral, snow, wires, roses, perfume, music, and a goddess. Okay, so that would be any 2. How does the poet feel about his mistress? He accepts her ordinariness and flaws. He loves her for it. He will not be false about his love by using unrealistic comparisons. Okay, there's authenticity. Are there ideals of beauty that exist in society at present? Yes. So people look at height, complexion, physical strength, dress, and it changes with each generation. Give a modern rephrasing of 7 and 8. Perfume has a much better smell than my mistress's breath. 7. Explain what the speaker means when he says the mistress treads on the ground. She doesn't float when she walks, okay? You can hear her footfalls. Quote and explain one line that the speaker loves his mistress for who she is. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare, okay? Unique. How does the poem shift in the last 2 lines? Okay, he's spent most of it telling the reader that my mistress is not this. She's ordinary, very real. And then he says that he loves her despite this, and that's what makes it genuine. Who is the speaker ridiculing? So contemporary poets of Shakespeare would often exaggerate the flattery of their women, their lovers, their mistresses, etc., to such an extent that it didn't actually really seem very real. So that is who he is ridiculing. He's basically saying that it's not genuine. Okay, 11, critically evaluate whether this poem is effective or not. So most love poems are supposed to praise a woman's beauty or flatter her in the hopes that one might take her to tea. Shakespeare doesn't do this. So technically he failed, but the conclusion is strong enough to actually bring that around. 12. Does Shakespeare make a fair point? Do some love poems take these comparisons too far? Yes. Okay. When telling a woman she's beautiful, take into consideration that she is not perfect. Okay. Loving a perfect person is easy. Loving an imperfect person, that is the real test. All right. Then, lastly, we've got to learn how to speak. So this is talking about language and appreciating language and understanding effective communication in a South African context. So 2 geographical features equated with language or that goes with language are rivers and fountains. They have a starting point, they have a development, they have a result. Human-made things, traveling, especially pioneers, people who are coming to the land for the first time, and the progression of technology, okay, because languages that don't adapt die. What is the poet's motivation for structuring many of the main sentences without a finite verb? To show it's continuous. To pass, to bury, to understand. Process hasn't stopped. When learning a language, there is much to discover and it changes and adapts. Okay, then lastly, we have this poetry essay. Let me just move my camera a little bit closer. Okay, 250 to 300 words. Critically discuss the use of sentence structure, parts of speech, and overall structure, and how it explores value in learning how to communicate. So, first introduction. You can see there it's rephrasing the topic. So I am looking at effective communication, looking at structure and the celebration of it. So there should be 3 paragraphs. So infinite verbs, you give a few examples, indicates that learning is continuous. Okay, languages can never truly be mastered. Okay, there are many languages spoken by South Africans, and you have to be aware of this and willing to learn phrases and words to effectively communicate. And then stick fast, chongololo, and stompie are some examples of slang created from the different languages, and these are shared. Sentence structure adds to the idea of continuing learning because they are incomplete. There are independent clauses missing. It allows the reader to fill in the blanks. And sometimes in learning a language or trying to communicate with someone, there are gaps. Okay, one cannot be rigid because you're working with very many different people using a variety of languages. In conclusion, the poem structure, stylistically and grammatically, is incomplete, shows that learning is continuous, and the openness of the reader required to learn and communicate effectively. So those are all the answers for the poems that I've done thus far, and there are 2 or 3 other poems that I'll be putting up. Thank you very much.